Hey everybody, welcome back to Overworld Legends, where we focus on growing the community. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan.
I got a beautiful brand new PNG for you that I definitely didn't screenshot from somewhere of you being an owl.
Yes, again, apologies everybody, still off screen. The good news is the water damage is at least resolved, and the drywall is back up in the office in the house. Yay! And so hopefully in a few weeks' time, I will be back in the office again, but there's still no flooring or anything else. But we're getting there, making progress. But anyway, we're not here to talk about those house challenges. We're here to talk about cool army lists today, aren't we, Evan?
Yes, and you've got a new army you've been working on, been very excited about with your kind of kit bashing of Age of Sigmar pieces, with old world pieces, with Wolves of the Sea theme, and you've got this Nurgle idea. So you've never really done Nurgle before.
No, I haven't. And this is, typical thing, right? We always, love the armies, love my vampire counts, love my orcs and goblins. They've been, in particular, I've been really focused on the orcs and goblins for, what do you think, about a year now, Evan? Something like that?
I Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah,
Because it
so
was
that's about
vampires
right.
before that, right?
Yeah, and I had some chaos as well, but the original chaos in this edition, the Grand Army by itself, wasn't really doing it for me. I had a blast of Orcs and Goblins, but time for the next hobby project, right? I think about an army a year is probably about my average, give or take, as I rotate through things and
Yeah.
such. But so everyone goes at different rates and their own pace, but mixing it up. So yeah, this one was fun. So I know in particular, I really was excited by the new Wolves of the Sea models with the Marauders. That was kind of the starting point once they released those incredible new models, and then that got me thinking of, all right, if I was going to like really go in on Marauders or at least that army type, make a new version of Chaos, what would I want to make? That was kind of the starting point. It started with those models, but ironically, I didn't actually end up with them at all. But those are pretty cool models, right, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have the Norse vibe to them. I would say that that's generally the thing that I like the most about the chaos is more of that undedicated, uncorrupted chaos. That's more just I'm Norse guys. We're trying to fish. We're trying to farm. You know what I mean? And we're
Hmm.
maybe we got some spicy gods going on, but we're also just chill dudes who have really big muscles. That's definitely my vibe. But I think you're going for much more of that like full on corrupted like I mean, I got to be totally honest with you. I think the Nurgle models can be very fancy and have a lot of detail. I am repulsed by them. I just want to burn and purge them off the table as soon as I can't hide that I like to be a prim and proper high elf type dude who I like all my fancy ranks and files of
Well,
troops and
that's
they're
good, right?
colorful.
Because now you have someone you to fight against, someone for your high elves
Exactly.
to hate. So, right, that's
Yeah,
the both. So,
and at least your giant chaos spawns won't have killing blow for fuck's sake.
that's true. Well, so this is interesting. So this episode is not necessarily going through just the list. It's kind of going through my hobby journey with
Yeah.
this army, right? So I think that's kind of the thing to share with everybody because everyone has their different approaches. So I ended up in a very different place. But the original place was all right. I've been rocking this Orcs and Goblins for a year. Had a blast with them. I still love them. Let's go on to the next hobby project. And so those Marauder models are like, that's awesome. I love those models. But then they did the new, it wasn't enough to tip it over, but then they released the new rules where like, hey, you can have these not marks of the Chaos Gods, but these other like, Marauder Viking traits, which are basically lesser versions of the gods. And it was actually those rules where you could increase the toughness on them and such, or give them more longer charges or different things that got me really excited. So, again, it started with some models that were exciting to me, but then it was also some rules and mechanics that made me say, that's an army. I want to see if I could find a way to make that work better than when I was previously trying to make Chaos Warriors work in this edition. I didn't quite get them to work the way I wanted to.
What were you trying before?
So before it was, I tried the all cavalry list before,
Yeah.
right? And again, cavalry just points for what they would do. They would still just die so quickly, and then if they didn't like break something on the charge, they would just get stuck in the combat attrition, and then they would just get wiped out. And again, because they're so expensive for points, you run into things like monsters, right? And monsters just make you cry, your cavalry cry.
Well, specifically
So
stomp attacks, I think, is what you're talking
yeah,
about.
that was definitely the big part. So I tried the cavalry thing. I also tried an all chariot thing, kind of a road. Road Warrior thing, right? A Mad Max themed
Yeah.
army list, and
Yeah.
that was super fun. I converted a bunch of chariots, and I still like it. It's really cool, but just mechanically, chariots are just not mobile. Ironically, they're just not mobile enough in this edition, and they just don't bring enough weight or reliance. So that wasn't working. And then I also just tried multiple times with the Chaos Warriors, and wasn't. Again, they were just kind of bland. They didn't really do anything that special. The chaos marks weren't really that exciting, and they're just really, really expensive. And I
Yes.
guess the bigger problem is, chaos is you can go all ranged, with your magic shoot list, but beyond that, that's it. They're for the most part run over and punch you in the face army list. So, and these are all fine versions of the army. There's nothing wrong with them, but for me, it just wasn't as dynamic or exciting as like the orcs or goblins, or even the vampire cats are a lot more dynamic and interesting.
Yes. Well, I certainly think they've got a lot of options, and so Wolves of the Sea was definitely something that was very interesting when it came out. You were a little bit more limited in the character selection, but the units that you could bring were far potentially more dynamic. They didn't really have the Chaos Knights in core, which used to be kind of like the staple. But on the
Yeah,
other hand, having those Berserkers, having the access to the Huskarls and things like that, and you still have lots
yeah.
of monsters and a very large rare selection gives you a great option for a Chaos Corrupted E-Force. Even though Wolves of the Sea is, I would say, arguably kind of supposed to be the opposite. Because Wolves of the Sea was supposed to be a little bit more of like the Viking Sea Raider force. But having that really large rare slot gives you a lot of options here. You've got the Giant Spawn, the Shaggoth, the Chaos Giant, Trolls, Dragon Ogres.
You
You got
can
a
if
lot
you
of
want to.
rare units.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
how else are
can,
you going
and
to
it is
fit three
interesting.
giants, right? You can't fit three
Well,
giants in 500 points.
yeah, and I think, and I tried, and I played the Wolves of the Sea multiple times when it came out, and it's a fine list. But again, the bulk of the army is you have whether it's a lot of berserkers or a lot of marauders. And remember when it came out, they were on the smaller base sizes. They're fine. They just weren't as dynamic as I wanted them to be, and such, and just it wasn't working. But again, once they updated them with those new rules where you could customize them more with these new, tribal markings and such,
Yes.
which are very effective, it really gave them a whole new lease on life, in a really exciting
So why don't we go through a
way.
little bit of what things you were thinking about, what things you've currently gotten in your list idea. I've got our old world builder up in front of me. I can put some stuff in front of people for them to look at. But
Yeah,
I
we
but I
we can
while
just
you're
get
doing
through it.
that, while you pull up your ideas in your head, I will say 100% something that happens in Warhammer all the time is that good rules not only sell models but they sell armies because when you have some good fun rules, do you have any idea how many people have bought a Beastman army for their first? I mean, I'm including that
Hmm.
because of the good rules, the interesting rules, and the vibe. And now I'm buying these 15-year-old plastic kits of Beastmen that came out in 7th edition because they finally have rules that make them feel the way they should. Feel good on
Oh,
the table.
absolutely. Rules always sell. They always have. They always will. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean to be top tier because again, even right now with the Marauder theme list, like my goal wasn't here's I want to do this list because they have new rules. Now, yes, did the rules make them stronger? Yes, they did, but they're not top meta, and they're still not top meta. The top meta has still been dominated, has been for a long time by the mortuary cult lists, by the Beastman list right now, right, and a couple others. We've done multiple episodes on those, so we're not going to go through that. And again, there's nothing wrong if that's what you want. You have get the most out of your games with your community, but it is a mean it factor. We spend hundreds of hours collecting, assembling, painting, playing with these models in our armies and our collections. When you put them on the table, if the rules aren't there to support them, it is very I've seen it for over 30 years now. It's discouraging. And if the rules are fun and dynamic, and again, it's like orcs and goblins, um, they're not a top tier meta list. They can't, but they are definitely competitive, right? But they're also just rules and mechanics of them are just really fun to play.
Yeah. So what characters do you have in your list?
Well, I think let's go from there. So we started with that was the starting point, and I started putting the
Yeah.
list together. And what then the next step for me was okay. I want to make this list. I know that the heart and soul of it needs to be some Marauders, a lot, either Berserkers or something like that. And I know I'm going
Hmm.
to have Giant Chaos Spawn because those are really good. So then at that point,
Okay.
for me, I started thinking about what's the theme of the army? What are the models I want to collect that excite me? I started with the Marauder models. And then
Okay.
just going through different versions. All right, do I want to do corn? Because even the marks still are representing a god, right? And there's a version, and my previous chaos list was just a generic, black armor chaos list, right? Kind of an
Yeah.
undivided color scheme. And I'm like, no, this time I want to go do something new. And then it was actually the next thing is when those rot swords came out.
Yeah.
So AOS released this new wave of the Nurgle Chaos Warriors and Nurgle Pestigors and Nurgle Knights, and I'm like, those are the coolest thing ever. And I've always wanted a Nurgle army, and I'm like, you know what? Let's just go in all in on Nurgle because I want to include those models. And again, different people play different ways. I'm very much about whatever's the coolest model at the time. So if it's an old world model, I'm going to use an old world model. If it's an AOS model, I'm going to use an AOS model. If it's a different 3D print or something, I'm going to use that, right? So, but the models are core to me putting it on the table. So that's when I shifted towards from starting with the Marauder rules. I'm like, well, I could go all in on Nurgle. And then it was a question of, okay, I didn't actually start with what are all the units I want to put in the army,
Right.
which sometimes you can do. I started with what are all the models I want to put on the table? What are all the models I want to paint?
Got
That
it.
was the next step for me. So, like, what are all the cool nurgly things that Evan hates that I always wanted to collect and I never got around to collecting them? So that for me was like, for instance, like the big old Glockkin. Do you remember the Glockkin model, Evan?
Yeah, that thing's enormous.
Yeah, right. So he's like a greater demon of Nurgle, but he's not. He's technically it's three brothers, and two of them are riding on top of him, and he's that. So I'm like, okay, I want to have that. That's the centerpiece. That's actually where I started. What's the centerpiece of the army? I'm like, well, Glockkin has to be the centerpiece of the army, and it's like, well, what is it going to be? I'm like, well, I guess he's got to be a chaos character on a dragon because he's so big. I don't know what else he would be. Um, and like he could have been. I thought for a moment maybe I make him the greater spawns of Nurgle, greater chaos
Yeah, this
spawns
dude
Nurgle
is
mark.
stupid big though. Yeah.
Right, and that's what I realized once I got my hands on the models. Like he's just too big for that base. Now again, the base for the Chaos Dragon is actually pretty small too. But again, I'm not playing a competitive list to go win at tournaments, right? Because I'm always the person who's running the tournament. So I'm putting together a list that I just want to play. So I actually will take this guy and I just put him on 100 by 150 base because I hope that in addition to all dragons just go on 100 by 150 base, just like
I
the taking card thing.
100,000% agree with you.
They
Yes.
just should. So it's going to happen. It's just a question of how long is it going to take for them to upscale them, remake all the model range and upscale them
I
to the new 32 millimeter scale. It's just going to take
I,
time.
I think the number one reason why you didn't see that happen yet is because there were a lot of old metal dragons that were tiny and they wanted old world to be a very positive ancient collection game where you
Yeah,
can bring
bring
out your
back your old stuff.
bloodthirster that's the size of a troll and you can play your bloodthirster on a 50 by 50 because we've got someone in our community who has a very ancient demon army, like literally like the first edition metal
Yep.
demons, and he
Yep.
has a bloodthirster that's metal that is about this big, like 4 inches,
Yeah.
and
The old
it's
school
cute,
one. Yep.
and that's good that people can use that. But we also want to be able to use our big things, and there was a lot of people who wanted to use the Archaon model, who Archaon's riding an enormous dragon. That thing would barely fit on 100 by 150. That thing is freaking
Yep.
stupid big, and trying to put that
And,
on the
and
60
40K
by
went through
100 is
this.
sad. Yeah.
They went through this over time, and it's just gonna end. And GW knows the wrong answer is to just force everyone to change overnight. You have to make the change slowly over time. So it's not even going to happen all in addition to. I think it's going to happen over the next 10 years. It's going to take time as they phase it. And event. So we've seen it before. So anyway, so that's what I started with. That's the centerpiece model. And after I had the centerpiece model, then it was what are the next things? And I know I wanted rot swords. I'm like, cool, I could use rot swords as like my marauder infantry. And then I'm like, this is just the brainstorming phase yet. I haven't made the list at all. And then I'm like, what do I want to use for berserkers? I'm like, well, oh, I could use the cool pestigore models for berserkers because at this point I'm like, if I'm going to go Nurgle, I want every model to be a Nurgle model and just fully embrace the film. Like just go all in on it. And then it was just going through the different model range of the pestigores are awesome, the rot swords are awesome. And then I saw they had the bloat spawn things, so I'm like, oh, those are perfect for the giant chaos spawns of Nurgle. So I'm like, I could use that. And then I got to the Blight Lords, and the Blight Lords on their big flies, and this is where I'm like, oh, what can I use? I'm like, well, this could either represent, depending on the base I put them on, it could be a dragon ogre or a skin wolf, depending on the base size I put them on. And then the last one is I needed some basic chaos spawns, and they had the plague drones, so they had the plague bearers on top of the giant flies. I'm like, well, I just take the plague bearer off and just have a big old disgusting fly, and I'm like, that's a chaos spawn of Nurgle, done. So that was the inception of like the model phase, and then the next phase was then coming up with the theme, even before the list at that point. So I have the Nurgle theme, but how am I going to paint them? So this is where I went through a couple different conversations with people where, okay, if I want to paint them all Nurgly colors, and a big thing for me is I'm struggling to find time to paint my armies. I'm sure Evan, you can understand that, and it's difficult between work and the family and life and running all the events, running the community. It's a huge time commitment. So I'm struggling to paint the models the way I want to paint them as I used to be able to. So I've decided for this army, I'm going to just embrace contrast. And I've just told myself the whole army is just going to be contrast, so I know I can get it done. Have you tried that yet, Evan?
Yes, I use contrast a lot. I do use contrast with other paints. I kind of go back and forth. I like to use contrast for certain bits and not for others. Like for example, I don't know, I have never found a contrast green that I'm really happy with, but contrast
Mm,
like reds and blues I like a lot, contrast yellow I like a lot. So it just varies. So like for example, what I love to do is use contrast for things like, oh, you've got like an ammunition pouch or like a crossbow, bolt or something like that, where you've got like a pouch, like a cloth or leather strap and pouch, like
hmm
things like that, or belts. And I'll use contrast for that because it looks really, really good to do like khaki, tan, leather, brown color just in one fell swoop. But then when it
Yeah.
comes to something like a banner, especially let's say a banner, there's often folds and wrinkles in that. But if you just do a single layer of contrast over like a white undercoat on a banner, I don't really love the look of that. I like to allow it to pool and reset shade, but then I'll still do like a highlight color on top because those flat surfaces won't work very well. Another example is like if you have any kind of tank or vehicle or anything like that that you're going to paint a flat surface, contrast can still be somewhat useful, but you're not going to like the end result of just using contrast. You're going to want to do something else too. So there
Oh,
are there
yeah.
are there are fewer models in old world that are just big flat square surfaces, obviously.
Yeah.
But I've
But to your point, like if
yeah
you're painting like a Space Marine tank with just flat panels, contrast is not
yeah
not the go-to for
no
that at all.
no
No. But for organic shapes, it's good for that. So this will be interesting because again, my typical go-to is even on a goblin, I'd spend 8 hours painting a goblin. But the
yeah, you're
reality
insane.
is, I am totally insane. But I
You're
used to
insane.
win painting competitions in Ren Man all the time. But I'm at a point in my life right now where I just don't have the time for that, and I really want to get my army painted. So that was part of the compromise I made with myself. The promise I made to myself is I will paint it all with contrast. It doesn't mean I can't highlight or dry brush on top of it, but the bulk has to be contrast. So
Sure.
then it was picking even, and again, I still haven't made my list. Like I still haven't made my list. So at this point, I'm just going through the theme and the creative process, and I'm like, all right, if I'm going to go Nurgle color scheme, what do I want to do? What for the bases? Because that's core to it as well. And people say the obvious go with swamp, and there's nothing wrong with swamps. But Evan, what's the problem if you have a Nurgle model on a swamp?
Well, then you just have a big brown pile of shit.
Right. It doesn't pop at all. The model just blends into the base entirely, and so which is why for me, because I want to make sure the model pops on standard bit, that the base is complementing the model, not just blending into the model. So I didn't want to do that. Now going with white and snow is a great contrast to make it pop, but I've done snow multiple times, so it's not because that wasn't a good answer. It's just I've done it multiple times, right? And the same thing where I didn't want to go with the lava scheme and such with Nurgle. You can, but again, it's not gonna, I think, make the model pop quite as much. And ultimately, I'm like, oh, what if I go with, you know what I found? There was that one Nurgle model that Chaos Champion guy who has the tentacles coming out of him. Do you know the model I'm talking about?
No, I don't. As soon
You
as
gotta
something
look
has
it up.
tentacles, I'm kind of checking out. That's kind of where I'm at.
It's
I'm like,
super
ew,
cool.
gross.
He's a chaos. You can look it up.
Ew.
It's super cool. He's an AOS model. He's got an axe on one side, and he's got like tentacles coming out of his left side as his arm. It's super badass. And
Okay.
he's all aquatic theme, and he's got a whole aquatic lore and story. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's super cool. What if I actually made them a pirate theme? And then if I had them all like pirate Nurgle, and then from there I'm like, well, and then I was thinking about the Pirates of the Caribbean movie and like, oh, it would be perfect with that. What if I actually make them Davy Jones themed? So they're actually like covered in barnacles and seaweed
Okay.
and crustaceans, and they're basically all drowned and they're at the bottom from coming from the bottom of the ocean. And I'm like, okay, this is super, super cool. And then one of the fun new tools now is I sat down for, and it didn't take long at all. I literally just typed this all into like one of the AI tools in ChatGPT, and it started helping me visualize it. Because typically this is where I go and like collect a whole bunch of images on the internet to like a mood board for my army before I paint it or lock in a color scheme. But it was super easy that I was able to do it on the AI things really, really quick to just brainstorm it. And I was able to go through all the models and look what they look like, and then look what the basis would look like if there was coral and water and fish and seashells and pirate treasure. And I'm like, that's it. I love it. I'm sold. So that was the themes locked in and the color schemes locked in. So now it's like, let's make a list. So ironically, there was a long journey before I even got to let's put some points onto paper. Is that how you typically do it, Evan?
No, which is funny
Yeah.
because I'm actually someone who very often I'll actually start doing a list build before I make an army because I do kind of want to poke around at like, well, what actually does this look like? What units go where? What how many models do you end up with? And how many models do I need to buy? And then how does that army come into the table? Because one good example of this is you might be super in love with an army's rare choices, but
Yeah.
then you might find out, oh, I can't fit all of the rare choices I like in my list, and that's going to be kind of sad because I might want all these rare choices and they won't actually all fit. A great example of that though that doesn't actually quite have that is Skaven, because you can fit a single warp lightning cannon, a single crap, the doom wheel, single doom wheel, warp lightning cannon, and hell pit abomination. All of that is like 495 points for those three things,
Mm-hmm.
which is like
Mm-hmm.
cool, great. They actually all fit there, awesome. But then that's not always the case. And then so if the list you really want doesn't quite work, for example, another example of that is in vampire counts. I love blood knights, love them.
Yeah.
They're awesome. I also love
Super cool.
vargeists. Guess what? They're both
Mm-hmm.
rare.
Yeah. They compete.
Unless you take the absolutely terrible Strigoi Ghoul King as your general, then you can have your other also terrible Vargeist and special. I'm like, ugh, awful,
Yeah,
sucks.
if you yeah,
Anyway,
I've tried that before. If you want to do like an all vampire unit vampire army, you just really can't. The army construction just doesn't let you.
so what I end up with when I do that is I take the Vampire Lord on a dragon, which is actually I use the my beautiful my girl Neferata. She's my number
Yep,
one.
she's awesome.
And then I take I've got a 3D printed set of quote unquote grave guard, but they're actually vampire guard. But it's the idea, like they're firstborn blooded vampires who have full plate
Which is
armor and they're kind of
awesome.
on foot with some halberds,
Super cool.
and that's kind of gives you that like elite infantry feel. And then they'll just act as graveguard with great weapons because strength and whatever. And generally speaking, you can get that graveguard unit up to like initiative 7 if you have enough freaking buffs. So it's like it's not that big of a deal to be like, yeah, sure, they can swing pretty quick. Um, and then you got the Blood Knights in rare, and it's like, sure, I actually like that a lot because I have like an army of nothing but vampires, to be honest. At least in my
Yep,
head, I do. But then I actually am
super
already at
fun.
1,500 points, and I'm like, well, what the hell is the rest of the army gonna be? I have 3 units, and I'm at 1,500 points.
Yeah,
And I
and
had
there's
all the
no
stuff
right
I
or
wanted.
wrong method here. This is just different ways to approach army construction, right?
Yes, I think what most beginners do is either they build an army based off of some kind of a starter set. So you have a starter set, and you're like, okay, I bought the starter set. I'm building these models. What kind of army can I make? That's a good way to go about it. So generally a little bit potentially more direct because you already have a list of models to write a list for. Then you have people who they kind of start with a list idea. We do have one example of someone in our community who's getting started, and they have a list of ogres that they were having us look at. And they kind of start with that list idea and they're like, well, this is something I was thinking about doing. What else could I change or add to it? That's another good way to go. It is challenging though, because especially as a beginner, it can be incredibly overwhelming to try to make an army list, especially an old world builder or any kind of old world army list. There are so many choices. Okay, I know
Yep.
for competitive people or people who go to tournaments or whatever, people play this game a lot, it feels like, oh, there's no choices. I have to always play the same thing. Actually, when you're like a new player and you don't know which things are like the strongest or which things are the best, it can be very overwhelming how many choices you have, and whether or
For
not you
sure.
take, the whether or not you take the talisman protection or the meteoric iron, something like that. That can be a big deal for some people when they don't really get that or they don't know how it works. Um,
All right, so let's dive in then. So let's go through my thought process on this army, keeping in mind that my goal was cool. I have a color scheme, I have a theme, I have the models I want to put on the table. Now let's make a list that is strong. It is, but is also right. I know going into this, it's not about winning first place at a single GT. That's not my goal. So just to state that from the
Right.
beginning. So there are choices I'm making that are not optimized because I'm not trying to min max to the nth degree, but it is still a pretty strong list. So I
Yeah.
start then I typically do start with the characters, not
Okay.
always, but in this case, right, I started with my centerpiece model for this army was Glotkin. So I know I want a chaos character on a Chaos Dragon Wolves of the Sea. And this also again, there's different character restrictions in the Wolves of the Sea versus the Grand Army for Chaos. So you have to work around that. That's some factors. So when it comes to the Chaos Lord, to me, it's you're because of the match play guide, which we use, and almost every community that I know has embraced it, of the cap of in a 2,000 point game, 500 points per on a character. That means I'm going to go with a Chaos Lord on a dragon that has nothing, right?
Okay.
He's basically naked. Or I need to downgrade to an exalted um, chaos character on the dragon, and I have to accept that he is one less toughness. He has one less weapon skill leadership. And the biggest things, right, the downgrades, there's the -1 toughness is the biggest difference. -1 attack stinks, but then also he's impetuous. And for me, it's like it's a no-brainer. Yep, I'm going to do that because again, I'm not trying to min-max, and I'd rather have some magic items. So that's where I start with. Okay, let's go with the exalted chaos guy on a dragon. So I don't know, Evan,
Okay.
if you're plugging this into the system or not yet.
I am plugging it in.
Oh,
We're all plugged.
all right. And then the next thing you have to click is the Mark of Nurgle,
Yep.
because I
Just did.
stated from the beginning, if I can give things the Mark of Nurgle, I'm going to, because I'm going to go all in on Nurgle. So is it really optimal? No. To me, it's not worth the points at all, but it doesn't matter. I'm going with the theme, because typically I wouldn't do it. Because someone having to reroll sixes is, it's a lot of points for that. So anyway, but we're embracing the stench. So then the next thing was for me, I you can go all offense, but in particular, I like my characters on the big beastie boys to just give them a great weapon if I could do that, because the great weapon is just a fine traditional weapon, and I'd rather give him more defensive capabilities and
Well, you
hopefully
also
with
have the luxury of having an ensorcelled hand weapon to fall back on when the Green Knight tries to, poke you in the rear end. Not everyone
Yes,
gets that.
yes, because he's chaos, so he will have that. Now he doesn't have the benefit of full plate, but it doesn't matter because he's on the dragon, and the dragon has full plate, and you can't stack the dragon's armor with his armor. So inherently, and then that means I don't need to give him a shield, because normally if I could give him a shield, I would, because he'd stack his full plate plus the shield, which would give him one more armor save versus shooting attacks. But because he only has heavy armor because he's not the Lord level character, right? It doesn't matter. So that's the reason why I didn't pick the shield. Um, then the next thing is okay, I want to make sure because he's all Nurgle, right? So I want to give him something that gives regen because that's very a Nurgle theme. So
Okay.
I believe there's the two regen items, but there's the more recent regen one that, if you can find it, is like, let me see what it's called.
Talisman
It
of the
gives him,
Carrion Crow.
yeah, it's the one that gives him regen and poison.
Poison. Yeah, that's Talisman of the Carrion Crow. 45 points. All right.
Yeah, so it's
So
expensive.
just to check in, we're at 469 for a great weapon, Mark of Nurgle, and regen. That's where we're at.
Yep.
We have 30 points
Um,
left.
right. So this is where okay, he has his best armor save is going to be a 4 up. That's fine. It's not the best, but pretty good. But he's got regen, right? And his
Mm-hmm.
toughness isn't as high, but he's got the Marker Nurgle that I want, and he still has the 5 up award save built into him because he's wearing Chaos Goodness. So the last thing I just gave him is I will always roll every single turn for my characters on the Gaze of Gods table. So probably a good investment to give him one favor of the gods to avoid one stupidity roll.
All right. Favor of
And
the
then that's it.
Gods. Really? All right. I would say I like all the stuff you're doing so far. I think that every single 20-point item that gives you MR2 is just stupidly good if you have the space to fit it in there. That's something I would consider, especially because you know what this guy would really not like to see is 7 Vile Tides coming at him and they all just zap him to death. And
You're not
so
wrong,
that's
but again,
yeah.
and yes,
You're
the,
not
the
trying to be
brazen
min
collar for
max either.
20 points is totally the right min max answer, but that's
Okay.
just not how I'm building the list, right? And that's
Sounds
just
good.
like I said, caveat going into this. This is not optimized. This is just it is strong, but I know it could be min maxed better. Um, All right. So that was that. Then the next thing, before we go, I know I'm going to have a sorcerer, but we can come back to the sorcerer lord. That wasn't my next slot in the list, actually. So after that,
Okay.
I'm like, okay, no, I want Glockkin. Then I know I want those awesome bloat blighted or bloat spawn things. So straight to the rare and
Okay.
slap in 2 giant spawns of chaos with the Marker Nurgle because I know I
All
want
right.
2 on the battlefield.
All right.
And technically, you can fit points wise 3 on the battlefield because you get more rare points, but you're only allowed 1 per 1,000 points. Therefore, I'm stuck at 2.
Yeah, match play guide is
Otherwise, it would
also
have taken
0 to
3.
2 of any rare, right? But yeah,
Yep.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
Do we have any other
But I'm just
immediate
explaining
we
it to
must add?
people on why not take more because I
Yeah.
can't. That's why.
Yeah. You know, to be honest, it's
Um,
actually real close to be able to fit 4 because you have 320 points
mhm.
left. You could, if they were not Nurgle, if they were unmarked or something, and you had unlimited slots, you could fit like 4 of those fuckers. That'd be
You could.
crazy.
And again, the corn one is good, the Nurgle one's good. They're both good, but I'm just going straight with the theme of Nurgle and the 5 in the regen wherever I can fit it in the army. So
Hmm.
there you go, and they're very good, and the random movement is a lot of fun too, and so that makes it fun.
A lot of fun for the person who
So
gets to do it.
yep, be prepared on the other side. So then the next thing I actually shifted over to was my core.
Okay.
And this is where I went back and forth a couple times where I tried multiple versions of the list where I had just a few because you got to spend 500 points. So I know I wanted Berserkers because Berserkers are awesome. The biggest downside to Berserkers is they're unreliable with ambush, but ambush is very, very powerful when it works. And my thought
Hmm.
was, I want at least 4 units of Berserkers no matter what, because that's going to increase my odds that some of them will come on when I want them to, right? Because it's a 50-50 chance on turn 2, 3, 4, and then on turn 5, they auto come in. But that's just the thought process. I started with 4 units to increase the odds because if you only have 2, right, I wanted them to come in. Um, Now, I did toy back and forth with do I also want a big brick of Marauders that are not Berserkers, just lugging it up the battlefield, and hopefully maybe I get a Chaos Sorcerer with a Steed of Shadows to move them forward and give them great weapons. And I tried to choose a few versions of that list, and it can be effective. But what's happening a lot in this edition right now is that people once you put I hate putting um, you know uh, like 600 plus points into a unit.
Hmm.
If I can avoid it, I will sometimes. But in particular, 600 points into an infantry unit that people can slow down, right? Because they can put speed bumps in the way. They can dispel my spell. So hey,
Hmm.
maybe I have all the combos, but maybe I just don't roll my spell to go off, right? And suddenly I'm just going 4 inches, a turn, assuming or marching. So it's gonna take forever. So they're just not that nimble. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why the big brick. I love the big brick, but it's just not. It's not reliable, even with all these different tactics. So while I started there, I actually switched it up, and I started with 5-man berserker units, but I ended up switching them to 10-man berserker units. And of course, they need to have flails, so they hit hard as possible. They need to spend the point for ambushers because I want them to ambush, and then you need to give them unnatural fortitude as their trait, so that they have the extra toughness. Because toughness 5 berserkers are awesome. Trust me, they still die all the time because they have like no armor. They get the 6 up ward save. They'll die left and right, but going from toughness 4 to 5 is a big deal.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's
Um,
something really rare. There's no other core unit in the game that could be that tough. So,
Yep. And then the last thing that I did add to them, and again, while not as effective, is I actually did give them all throwing axes. And
okay.
the reason why I give them all throwing axes is, well, one, that's their only ranged weapon, but it's +1 strength and it is quick shot. And the thing is, the turn that they come in ambush, you're not charging the turn that you come in. But the good
Yeah.
news is that they move 5. They have a 5-inch move, so they can come in and then do their 5-inch move, and then they're likely going to be within range to throwing axe at something. And are you going to use the throwing axes to hurt a dragon or to take down a chaos lord or a big cavalry unit? No. But you know what they're great at taking out? They're great at taking out fast cavalry on the flanks of your enemies, or they're great at taking out like squig hoppers or things like that. They're fantastic at that. And it's just great to have it on the unit for 1 point a model. So to me, um, it's not about tearing down the big things. They actually are very effective, especially when you have en masse. When you have like 30, 40 of these guys throwing axes, they will tear apart the enemy's chaff units, which is very helpful.
That's
Um,
very true. Do you give them champions?
and Yep. So I don't. I typically start with no, but the first unit I do give a champion to, because again, I want these units to be as cheap as possible. I expect them to all die. That is the expectation. They're
Are
all
they
gonna
units of
ambush and they're all
5,
gonna
by
die.
the way?
I started with units of 5, and I ended up as with a unit of 10, a unit of 10, a unit of 9, and a unit of 9.
All
And
right.
this is after I took out. When I had the 30-man brick, that's when I took all those points and I said, let's just make these berserkers that are ambushing is much larger. So 10-man bricks. But I had to knock 2 down to 9 for points. And then, of course, I had to give one of them a champion. Do you know why the Wolves of the Sea needed one to have a champion?
So you can do the challenge at the beginning.
That's exactly right. So that's the only reason why, because it's not worth one more attack to me, 8 points, but you need it for the beginning of the game challenge. Because what kind of chaos player would you be, Wolves of the Sea, if you don't do the challenge at the beginning of the game? Because that's
Yeah.
just that. I think it might be the coolest rule they've made this entire edition.
I would I think that's the
It's up
best
there.
Warriors of Chaos rule. Um
Yeah,
might be one of the best Armies of Infamy rules for sure. I think that a lot of the Armies of
just for
Infamy have
flavor
great
and
themes that they're
theme,
going for. Yeah.
it's such a great. That's one of the best examples of
Yeah,
that right there is a rule where theme and mechanics have just the most perfect blend.
definitely. Definitely.
Um, so that should be 502 points.
Yes.
Okay, so now I've hit my core check. Now the next thing is, again, originally I had a few different versions, but the next thing I added was 2 chaos spawns and give them the mark of Nurgle. So that's just an immediate go-to.
The giant you mean the giants ones
Normal chaos
or
spawns,
oh my
just
goodness,
chaos spawns.
Mike. They have 2d6 plus 1 movement. What are you thinking?
They
You
do.
crazy person.
And so the chaos spawns, are they the most powerful things to kill things? Not at all. But they are random movers, and random movers are very powerful. And they're
Yeah.
also the chaos spawns, right? They're going to be toughness 5, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, they're toughness 5, and they have poison, and they're random movers. More importantly, they're unbreakable. So they're just like great, get in the way of slow things down. They're some of the best speed bumps in the game. And also because they're random movers, they can threaten other skirmishing units that get to the close of your units and such. Because they can wheel, if it's a one-man unit, they can wheel very easily to charge things that it's not necessarily facing at the start of the turn. So they're super effective at that. So basically, I put them together. I don't want them separated. I want them together, and I want to put them up one of the flanks that my enemy is more likely to put some fast cavalry or chaff around.
Okay.
That's typically what they're hunting. Yep. Or to just slow something down. If maybe there's some blood knights over there, and I just need to tie them up. They're going to kill it for sure, but it's not about killing. It's just about, all right, you got to kill one. Cool. The next turn you got to kill the other. It's just to slow them down, right? That's the purpose of it. Um, and then the next thing is it came down to, do I want dragon ogres or do I want skin wolves? That was the choice, and both are good in different ways. But then for me, I decided ultimately to go with the skin wolves, not because I think their stats are inherently better than dragon ogres, but because they're more flexible, because they can be in skirmish, and I think their rules are just really fun. That's really, it's not about dragon ogres. I think point for point are actually more powerful, but I think skin wolves are just more fun mechanically. That was my
Yeah, they
decision
have
making process.
they're kind of key. They have Primal Fury, which is basically really fun. It's the
Fun.
core Beastman rule. You know what's great though is that like Beastmen have an army rule that's like every single model, or pretty much like most of your army has this rule where like you get into combat, you roll Primal Fury, awesome, what a vibe. Where's everyone else's army rule? Like where's my Empire State Troops having detachments as like an extra cool, special, unique, powerful
Yep.
thing? Nope, everyone gets that now. Ellen
Yep.
Reflexes, lol. I'm just gonna laugh out of the room. But like it's what we
Yep.
want is everyone wants to have something like Primal Fury, which is awesome. Which is at the start of the
It's super
choose
cool.
and fight phase, you take the leadership test and you get to reroll ones to hit if you pass your leadership test. Awesome.
Yep.
And
They
then they
also
also have
have
the warp form.
they have the warp form, which is fun, and they also have, with my Nurgle themed army, they have 5 up regen. So to me, it's like, okay, that just fits great into the army.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, they have regency. So yeah, Dragoners have the armor save, right? It's a they've got a good armor
Yep,
save. They got a lot of
a
number of
lot of
wounds.
armor.
But Dragoners are also more expensive. They're like 60 something points by the time you're
Yeah,
done with it, and these guys
but
are
they
only
have with
45.
great weapons, they hit a lot harder.
Yeah, but you get to pick those. You get to either have the extra attacks. You can have 4 attacks, 5 attacks each with frenzy, right? And then you've got,
Yep.
or you have +1 to the toughness, and then a better armor save, so that you can be a little bit
Yeah, but
tougher.
it's only
Or
in
you can have
combat,
armor
so
armor bane. Yeah,
you can't just do it at the start of your turn to help you versus shooting or magic.
yeah,
It's only in
yeah.
combat.
But I think the ambushers really help with preventing. And ambushers and random movement are both things that just make a shooting army go, "Oh crap, I'm shitting myself right now." Like
And
when
that's
I
the
try to
hope
have,
that hey, if
yeah,
exactly right. Hopefully the opponent's focused on the giant chaos spawns or the chaos lord on the dragon or the 40 ambushing berserkers that hopefully they're only going to shoot at this unit once if they
yeah.
shoot at them. That's the hope.
And these guys are movement 7 with Swift Stride.
Yes,
That
they're
is fast as
fast.
hell. Dragoners are slow. Dragoners are actually
Yes.
slow. They're much more of like
And they
an
can
infantry
go
unit.
into skirmish mode if you want
Yeah,
to. So pros and cons, but they're only T4. So they definitely die. They definitely die. They're T4
well, this
no
is
armor, so
they're the
they will
only
pop.
T4 thing in your entire army.
At the moment, that's right. But I started with them, and so I tried a few different versions of them, and ultimately I ended up with 6 of them. That's where I ended up,
Okay, all in one
um,
unit or 2 units.
all in one unit. And the reason why is then that adds in my last character. So now we go back up to characters. I said I wanted to. I always like taking a wizard. I just like having magic in my armies. Um, I will just always do that because it's just another fun phase of the game, and it feels very Warhammer: The Old World to me to have a
Okay.
wizard of some kind. And originally, I tried versions where I was toying with this guy where he was going to go with the big brick up the center, but ultimately decided not to do that because it was just so many points and they might not see combat ever.
Yeah.
Then I wanted to put him with the berserkers, but he can't ambush, and he also can't join a skirmishing unit, so that wasn't going to work. Then I tried versions where I put him with a bunch of cavalry, like the Huskarls, because the Huskarls are good, but then it just came down to there's just not enough points and they're not core. If they were core, I totally would have put him with Huskarls, but they're not. So ultimately, I this is where I decided, okay, I want him to be able to, if he needs to go solo, he can go solo, but I want him to be because I want him to be with the Nurgle theme, the +1 toughness Nurgle theme ability spell, signature spell, because of course he's going to start with the Marker Nurgle. So, you know,
Yeah.
first things first, level 4 Marker Nurgle. That was the starting point.
Well, I'm sorry,
Then
but first things first is, and this is where I was wondering if you had even considered. Were you thinking about Demon Prince?
yes, I did thought about going with the Demon Prince and such, and I very much wanted to do a Demon Prince, and that's why I was looking. Could I, with the army composition, take a Demon Prince? But guess I can't have a Demon Prince or a Sorcerer Lord. It's one or the other. So the problem with the Demon Prince is I don't want him to be. I've tried Demon Princes in the past in this edition, and I like them so much, but their demonic instability just they constantly just die from demonic instability all the time. I just they're just so vulnerable to it with combat resolution and such. So again, you can get
And the
around
big
it.
problem is you can't join a unit to give you like a built-in. My
Correct.
unit's always going to bring static 5
That was
counter
the
race. He
next thing
can't
is
do that. So
I wanted him to join the Skinwolf unit, which would have been
yeah,
perfect
yeah,
because they're both monstrous infantry, but he can't because he has the demonic rule and they don't.
yeah,
Therefore, he's not allowed to join their unit. So that was totally exactly what I wanted to do. I was super pumped about it, but then couldn't do it. So I'm like, all right, what else can I do? So I'm like, okay, well, if I take the Sorcerer Lord, and
okay,
then if the Skinwolves are start the game in open order, and if he needs to be part of the unit, then he can be on the demonic mount. The demonic mount is clumsy, therefore he can join their unit,
yes,
even though he's not the same base size. So that was the order of operations of why I ended up with that. And then as soon as I decided to put him on a demonic mount, I decided I'm just going to use what's the coolest demonic mounts out there that are Nurgle. And there's the snail guy, which is cool. I could
okay,
mark up a Nurgle one. There's an actual cool new AOS. He's super awesome with the scythe, the Nurgle sorcerer on the demonic horse. But there's also the new Festus Leech Lord model, and I'm like, oh, that I just have to put that on the table. It doesn't matter that it doesn't fit and it doesn't make sense. I'm not here to win tournaments. I'm here to make an awesome money. So I just want that model on the table. So I'm just going to put them on a slightly larger base size. It's a disadvantage anyway, and because I'm not competing in tournaments, I'm just playing at fun events. It doesn't matter. So I just want to put that model on the table. So that was going to be my sorcerer on the demonic mount, and then I could have him join the Skinwolf unit if they're in open order, and then again, if need be, he could leave the unit and they could go into skirmish order and they can break apart as separate things. So as soon as he's because I this is all about I wanted him to join a unit to give the +1 toughness buff, and then at that point, then I'm really might as well just go down either he's going to be solo and I abandon the toughness buff, or he's just buffing himself and he's flying solo, and then maybe I make him a battle wizard, or I have the strategy around he's going to join a unit and buff the unit, in which case I go demonology, which is what I decided to do because it has some of the best buff unit things in the game. And then I don't need to worry about rolling Steed of Shadows. I won't take it. If I roll that, I'll just default, because he's cavalry, I'll just default to um, the Nurgle signature spell. So that was the thought process of the Chaos
Well,
Lord. And
to
then
be
just
clear, you could Steed of Shadows the Skin Wolves without him, but that's not something you necessarily want to build around. It's kind of wild to do that.
Correct, and comes back to it's the same problem with the infantry unit. You can, until either you just don't roll it, you
Yeah.
don't get the spell, and then you're like, well, you can take the items to guarantee you get the spell. Yes, but then I can't take my Nurgle signature spell, and my whole premise is I wanted the Nurgle theme, so I'm looking for a way to use the Nurgle signature spell. The premise was not let's min max the list, right?
Sure, yeah.
So it was very much themed choice. It's still a very strong list, but I'm making choices that are not min maxing. So that's then it was okay. I want to have the spell. I want to be Nurgle themed. So he's got to have the mark of Nurgle. He's going to be on that mount. I want to use that model. And then this is the combo. And I'm not going to go battle magic. And then I'll give him demonic and have him join the unit. And then the last things is then what items do I give him? And ultimately, I give him the favor of the gods again because I'm going to roll on that gaze of the gods every single turn. Because again, you can get your chaos sorcerer characters; they're pretty beefy for wizards, and they're in full chaos armor with the 5-up save. They can hit. If you roll a few rolls on that table, they can punch pretty hard in combat. And so, especially then, if you also give them like some of the demonology buffs, they can hit hard.
Okay.
And then it came down to ultimately, I decided on giving him the Tomb of Spellcraft because I really like just re-rolling one of my spell rolls per turn. Because that's the thing that will fail the most often. You can go with magic items that gives them +1 to the casting roll. I personally would rather just have re-roll something in entirely the turn. If I'm casting 4 spells a turn, odds are pretty good one of those is going to fail miserably, right? Just on
Yeah,
the dice.
so I mean, basically, high elves have this all the time, which is one of the best. So high elves usually are just loaded with, "Hey, that's bullshit." Special rules, like that's their thing. Is
Yep.
they're supposed to be that annoying army that's like, "Why do you have all this crazy crap?" Well, it's like, well, because the stats aren't very good, and I'm actually really elite. But this is the one thing that they do kind of have is they all reroll 1 per turn. What I find happens a ton with that is, yeah, sometimes you go for a big high casting value spell and you don't get it off, and then you can re-roll and you do get it off. Once that does happen, now the high casting value spell went off, and it's really impossible for them to dispel. Another thing
Yep.
that happens is that you fail a spell that's not one of your most important spells, and you go, well, I won't reroll that one because I need to save it for later, and then you never needed it later. So you kind of end up not using it when you could have because you saved it for something. So
Yep.
what I would say is that the reroll to cast is dramatically improved by having spells that are high casting value, because not only are you more likely to fail them, you're more likely to need it.
Exactly right.
Whereas just
And
having high
as I was
casting bonus is better for if you're just high casting bonus is better for consistently getting your spell off and not dispel, but re-rolling is better when the spell is hard to get off in the first place.
exactly right. And if I was going with battle magic, I would rather that would be a case where +1 to cast would actually probably be better. But because I'm going with demonology, a lot of the spells are 9+ to cast. So
Yep.
that's the lore where like I believe, and someone can prove me wrong with the math, and that's fine. But my brain says I'd rather have the reroll on this.
Yeah, I would say the 10 pluses to cast, it's like if you don't have a reroller +1, it just feels awful. I think reroll is better as soon as you get to 10 plus. It feels to me. That's how it feels to me.
Yep.
I use high magic with just 2 10 pluses to cast all the time. I will say that I'm just now remembering that the lore of Shadowlands exists.
It does. Yep. And I've gone
Anyway,
through it.
moving on.
It's fun. but there's not a lot there. So I think that's it, right? I'm near my 2,000 points, pretty close to it.
You're 1995 there, bud.
There you go. So I could squeeze in 5 more points somewhere. The only other thing I've been toying around with that I haven't fully figured out if I want to like take something out is I would like to give my sorcerer lord a great. I'd like to give him a nicer magic weapon in combat, but at least he starts with the ensorcelled. He has an ensorcelled blade as well. So at least he's going to have that 1 AP. I was looking at some of the other items, and
The
so there
filth
might be a
mace.
point
How
where
are you not taking the filth mace there, bud? Filth mace.
because it's not doing it for me. So there's a version where I might drop. The problem is at this point I can't drop any more core points. There's no more core points to drop. I can't drop anything out of the greater response of Nurgle. There's nothing to drop there, and I can't drop anything. So I'd have to basically lose it, and I don't want to lower the skin wolves to 5. I could do that. So it'd basically be having to go from 6 to 5 skin wolves, or I would have to drop a chaos spawn. So again, if I really wanted to min max, dropping the chaos spawn would be the right answer, but that's just not what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah, I hear you. And as soon as you have the models you want to put those models on the table. All right. Well, I hope that explains to people not only how you can build a good list, because guess what? Nothing in this list is going to be under toughness 5, because everything either starts toughness 5 or 6, or you got the Skin Wolf unit where you have a spell to increase your toughness from 4 to with the Nurgle spell, you've got is it +1
Well,
or 2, depending on how much?
he could give them +1 toughness from the Nurgle spell, so they could get to 5 from that. If he also got the demonology spell off, they could go to toughness 6.
Right,
And then if they
yeah.
and then if they get into combat, they could go up to toughness 7.
Oh shit, yeah, because you can get another buff. Yeah. So look, you're doing a toughness skew, which by the way is very good against elves.
Toughness and regen. Yeah.
Toughness and regen. Yeah, but you're doing a toughness skew, which is it is a list archetype that can be very successful. It is something that can be, because basically when I say skew, I mean your whole army has this very specific theme in terms of its rules, is that it's very tough.
Yep.
And if it's basically a stat check, because if someone doesn't have enough high strength attacks, if they bring nothing but, like, first of all, if you have the Sea Guard garrison list, you're screwed. That whole list is nothing but strength 3 and 4 attacks. Like you will everything wounds on 6s. You can't do anything. You're done. You're done. Game over.
It's also a very mobile list as well.
Yeah, no, and you also have speed. You got
unusual
random movement. You got ambush.
Unusual for Nurgle.
But you're very mobile without cavalry, because you're random movement, right? And you've got skirmishing ambushers, and you have some fly. So yeah, so you've got a very wild. This is almost like a night goblin. Hey, Mike, this is a night goblin list.
It's not a night goblin list.
Yeah, it's a night. So you've got a unit of you've got 4 units of squig hoppers, right? That's your berserkers. You've got a war boss on a wyvern, and you've got a unit of basically trolls, and then you've got 2, a bunch of mango squigs. This is a night goblin list. Trolls. I'm calling you out.
I have no artillery, first of all.
That's true. That's true.
And my night goblin lists definitely do not have things as fast as the skin wolves, and they certainly don't have monsters like the greater.
I'd say this. Your skin wolves are the most unique part of it. But I will say, I'm smelling a little bit of night goblinness coming off of this, and that's fine, because that army has.
Well, I think what you're just sniffing is there are consistent mechanics in Old World in this edition that are strong, and there are some of them in the Goblin list, and some of those mechanics are also represented in this list.
I hear you, because you know what else? Also, everything in this list either charges 360, is a skirmisher, or it's a dragon.
Correct. And this list, you have to, and this list has the benefit of the challenge at the beginning of the game, because if this list goes first, you have 1 turn, and then the entire army is probably charging you, with the exception of the ambushers, which are a little random.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's against a gun line, which is a lot of the armies in the game. That's scary. And so yeah, taking that risk on, hey, if I do go first and you have a gun line with no screening troops, you're gonna have a bad time. I mean, you're gonna basically get pummeled, and that's usually what the gun line's about to do to the other player. So there you go. You feed them some of their own medicine. Awesome.
There you go. So I'm looking forward to. So right now I am. It's all assembled, and the fun thing is I've used my app Mini Magic to print out a whole bunch of basing bits, but also for the models themselves. So I have a whole bunch of octopus and barnacles and seaweed and coral, not just for the bases, but like I said, with the whole Davy Jones theme. So I'm actually gluing them all over the models on their armor and everything, and it just looks so cool.
Yeah.
So we'll share some pictures with that once I get it together. That's it.
All right.
We did it. We went through it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everyone out there can stay legendary. Mike, do you have anything else to say to all our
We'll
nerdly
see
people
you
out
next
there?
time. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thank you to our Patreons. We appreciate your support. We'll see you next time.